This is a tutorial on how to get around in Premiere Pro, how to find things, where things are located, some tricks and tips on how to lay video to the timeline, what things mean. The first thing you're going to want to know is how to find the shortcuts if you want to know what a shortcut is. So under the Edit tab at the top, and then click on the keyboard shortcuts icon. There you go. There's the whole keyboard layout, the way everything works. There's some things down here that you can look for. You can type in if you need to find one that you might say, hey, what is that, shortcut, and you type it in. But otherwise, you can look at this and see what shortcuts are available for what keys. And things we'll talk about are the V key being the main key for just selection, the razor tool, the A for track select, the N for rolling edit, the Y for slip edit, the in and out markers here. Those are the main ones. The zoom to sequence over here, the decrease and increase volume, the zoom in and out on the timeline. Those are the main ones. Backspace obviously helps. The left and right keys for a frame to the left and a frame to the right. But this is where you find them if you forget what those shortcuts are without having to actually mouse around too much. So with that said, let's get to the main tutorial. So let's talk about getting ready to edit in Premiere Pro. Let's look around the keyboard. I've got a project set up here. So I've got my folder up here, the bin as we'd call it, with all of the clips already loaded into it. But let's look around the interface and see what everything looks like. So from this bin, I want to back up one, so I'll use this up arrow folder here to go back to the main project folder. So that's the main project folder. Across the very top where my mouse is, there's a bunch of tabs with different things. So the project tab, the bin tab for my footage, the media browser where you go to import different types of footage, libraries, info effects is what you'll use next of all of those things. The libraries, info, markers, history, probably wouldn't ever use. So the effects folder has all your effects with some presets up here, and then some custom presets that I've saved. We'll talk about that later. You can save some presets. So let's navigate back to the project, which is you use these drop arrows here, and you'll find the project. So let's, I'm going to go ahead and create a VO to cut. So on the keyboard, you can do Control in the N key, and it'll create the new sequence. You name it. Let's call it VO Ginger at NCAT. Use the WGHP preset here at the bottom of the list. Click OK. So you've got a new sequence. You can also do right click to find a way to do stuff. And new item sequence, there's a bunch of stuff right here in the new item. So the right click in different spots will give you some controls of things, but there are some things hidden in here you might want to see. Down here, there's a new item button, so it'll also have those same things in it: sequence, project shortcut, etc. And some more advanced features. Down here to the left is the list view versus the thumbnail view, icon view. So if you want to change it all to thumbnails, you have this timeline I created earlier, this new one that I just created now, and my bin folder for the clips, or back to list view. Your preference. I use the list view for the outside project, and then when I go into a folder like this, I use thumbnails to see the thumbnails. So there you go. Back up one level. Just keep looking around and see the different things you can see. There's a search function there for searching. It's also right here. So if you're looking for something you've named earlier in a project, you can click on it and type it in. It'll find stuff for you. Trash can here to get rid of stuff. It deletes the currently selected items. So that's pretty much that for the bin. Right here's the viewer where, let's open a clip, where clips will go. When you click on them, this is called the source viewer. Your effects control is also there. So when you click on the effects control tab, any clip that you click on the timeline will be highlighted there. So let's just go back and put a couple of clips on the timeline to start with. I'm just going to drop one in. just to show that before we even go through a couple of ideas of how to put things on the timeline. But for your effects controls, all of your effects controls, when you highlight a clip on the timeline, will show up here under the effects control tab, and you can do whatever you want with all of the effects here. When you add effects from the effects menus, whatever you add drops into the effects controls for later use. And again, there's the drop down menu here to go through whatever may be inside of this area of the screen, which usually is just your source for your clips, your effects controls, your audio mixer, which never use it, so don't worry about that, and your metadata. If you need to see something there, fine. I don't think I've ever used it for anything. So basically just your clip and effects controls. And then over here to the right, and I'll say that your screen could be set up slightly differently, but most of the screens by default are about like this. I've customized mine just a little bit. And you can do that customization also. We'll talk about that in a bit, but this is your program monitor, which shows what is on the timeline. And there's really nothing else, no other tabs open in here. Get your timeline here, which we built, and you've got tabs across the top if you have multiple timelines open. So that log file that I created earlier is there, and then the tab for the VO that we just created is here. Across the top, you have a bunch of menu items here. This workspace is the one I created for myself to basically put this big sidebar over here like it is. So I had saved it. I named it Weaver Workspace. By default, if there's not a workspace saved special, this would be under editing. So you probably need to be in editing in your setup unless you save one on your own. If you need to adjust the audio, you go to the audio tab and it gives you the mixer control to adjust the left, right, which are by default in the WGHP preset are set like this. Nothing really to do in here necessarily, unless you need to adjust the left, right, which you probably will never have to do. The graphics, for more graphics work, is in the graphics tab. You can add and I'll do it now, Control T to add a layer of text, and it gives you all of the workspace over here if you want to work with it with a bigger view. But and it gives you all of the things. If you look over to the right, it gives you all of the parameters you can do with text. You can also, in a smaller area, work in your workspace, your editing workspace, because the text will pop up in the effects control panel with all the same. Working with text, it is better to work with text as a separate line on its own. There is a way to embed text into clips, but it gets clunky when you're trying to adjust sizes and stuff. With this, you can adjust the text independently of the video. We'll get into how to adjust that and make things work a little bit later. And so if you look down under your source monitor, there are some tools to be used that also have keyboard shortcuts. And if you hover over something, you can see what the keyboard shortcut is. So for a mark in point, it's just the I key. It's in parentheses there. The out point is an O key. If you want to go to the end point, it's Shift and I. Go to the out point, it's Shift and O. Play and stop the space bar. You can go one frame back and one frame forward using the left and right arrow keys that are in between the keyboard and the number part of the keyboard. So then to insert onto a timeline, you use the insert key. Did not mean to do that. Control Z, it's your friend. But basically insert. So we've got one long clip here. But if I wanted to split this clip by and put something in between it, so I'm picking, just a short segment of this. And if I use the insert function, which is also the comma key on the keyboard, it actually split that clip that's now at the beginning and the end and pushed the end of that clip down. And you can also do that in between cuts. So if this was a VO, but I want to put a clip here, So I'll go back and I'll find some random clip, endpoint with the I key, out point with the O key, and then insert. It pushes that frame down to match, to lay this clip inside in between that clip and that clip. Then you have the overwrite key right here. Overwrite is the period key on the keyboard. So at the end of a set of clips, you can use the overwrite or insert key, and it's essentially the same thing. It just adds the clip to the timeline in the length chosen by the in and out point here. But if I wanted to overwrite this clip, I'll put an in point, let's just say an out point there, or not even all the way to the end, let's just go there. And I want to insert just a little chunk of this clip right here. So I've got an endpoint only, endpoint and out point on the timeline, an endpoint on the source monitor, and I'll use the overwrite key, and it lays that footage in between without pushing down the clip. It basically, as it says, it overwrites. It's insert and overwrite. Here's another tool you can use. You can put your timeline on a frame that you want to save or export as a JPEG and use this tool right here. Control-Shift-E or click that export button, which does pretty cool. So ultimately, to edit a VO, you're just laying clips using the insert or overwrite key. You turn on your NATS audio channel. So let's look at that. You have your channels to turn on and off over here. So this inside column here, they're a little advanced. You don't really need them on or off for any given thing editing a VO. You cannot copy and paste anything to the timeline in one that's turned off. So if I turn that off, and obviously now no video lines are highlighted blue, I can't paste anything in or drop anything in at all. So they do have to be blue activated to paste or insert or overwrite clips. And there's a reason for that that's a little more advanced than talking about VOs. This left-hand column here is actually the tracks that you want to use when you drop a piece of video from your source to your timeline. So if I choose, let's say channel 3, it'll drop to channel 3, and I did an overwrite. So it actually left the channel 1 track alone because there's nothing turned on, but it put the channel 3 track on channel 3. Or you can move that channel 3 track up to channel 1 and drop that same clip in, drops it on channel 1. Turn all the clips on, drops them all in. So, choose the active track that you need, put it where you want it to fall, and drop it in. So maybe all of your sound bites are on your channel 3 mic for some short segment, but you want them to lay into channel 1 on the timeline. That's how you do that. So you can mix and match as needed to clean up your timeline, or to put all of your sound bites on channel 1 and all of your NAT sound on channel 2, but maybe you captured it on channel 3 because it was on the NATS mic, or channel 1 because it was on the lav, or maybe you have your log plugged into channel 2 or something like that. Another thing you can use as you poke around is the zoom keys. So the plus and minus keys up at the top on the keyboard, on the number row, plus and minus expands and shrinks the keyboard, or the timeline, I'm sorry. The slash key just under the backspace key will actually zoom the timeline to fit the screen. So if I zoom this really small using the minus key, but then hit the backslash key, it brings it back so that it all fits on the screen. Or if I've zoomed way up to see something close up, but I want to go back, the slash key brings it all back on the screen. Let's see if there's anything else that we could talk about as we look around and get familiar with all of the icons and tools. So this one here, is the resolution of that playback monitor. So you can like set it to half or quarter. Quarter's really bad, but it's the resolution that it plays it back at, so that your computer is not struggling if you've got fancy effects. Full is actually full resolution. Half is decent for a general edit, and then you can go back and look at it in full. It does, when you are paused, it shows you a full resolution preview pause screen, but when you play, it'll drop the resolution a little bit when you're in half and quarter. You can really see it in quarter, how it drops the resolution. There's a wrench key, this wrench icon in a couple of different places on the screen, and it'll give you some tools for within that window. So I can open up the safe margins and see the safe margins where you want to keep graphics inside of that area. And there's some other things that you'd never use, or that have other menus. There's the pause resolution has a thing. I haven't really ever noticed that. That's pretty much it. There are a couple of little icons here. There's some timeline settings that you can mess with. Not anything really important. There is this magnetic bit here, so it'll help you snap to the edit points. It'll click on the edit points because it's magnetic. And these other ones I don't really use a lot, so it's not really much to worry about. You can add markers with the M key or with that if you want a marker on a clip somewhere, or the same thing in a clip. If you have a shot you want to use but you don't need it yet and you want to mark it, you can just put a little marker on it. Come back and find it later. I didn't talk about the audio meters over here to the far right. So when you're in the source and in a point, notice there's a blue outline around the active window. So the active window here being the source, when you play, it'll show you which audio channels are active. None of this affects how you edit. This is only for your playback purposes. So I'll go where I have some sound on all, or at least on multiple channels. So you can turn off the solo. These are S for solo, so I can solo the main channel and can hear that channel clean. So I've turned off the on-camera mic, just turn it off. So when I'm just listening for sound bites or maybe even logging or whatever, I can isolate in the preview. And that, again, has no bearing on what can get dropped to the timeline. So if I want to add that sound bite down here, I already have an in and out point that's an 8-second bit, so I know that it's on channel 1, so I can put channel 1 where I want it, turn everything else off, and drop in that soundbite, and it's there.
Mass production, so that means you can produce millions and millions of tracks.
And if I did it the other way and dropped like channel 3 and didn't have channel 1 turned on, so I've dropped the audio and video with the
mass production, so
shotgun mic. So whatever your channels your audio's on, you can choose the correct one for any given edit that way. And then if I screwed up and I wanted to go back and fix this channel 3, I want to change that channel 3 back to channel 1. Right-clicked on that. Right-clicked on that. Go to audio channels, and you can change any of the channels from the timeline. This is literally modifying the clip on the timeline. I want to change it from channel 3 to channel 1. Click OK, and that is now channel 1. It should switch over to channel 1. I can also move that audio track up to the channel 1 on the timeline. So not only is it playing channel 1, I moved it up to the channel 1 slot on the timeline. I can actually move it anywhere I want to. I can slide it way down here. I can slide the video channels up a line if I want to overlap things for whatever reason. So you can move those around as needed also. And that's pretty much the basics of that. Another little trick is to highlight in between clips and hit the backspace key to move things together. Another key is the A key, called the track select key. It's A on the keyboard, and it gives you these two arrows, and you can click a clip and drag every clip from that clip and all the clips to the right. You can drag and create space. It only affects the clips from where you click and out. From where you click and out. Same thing going backwards. If I click that clip, even though there's a space, if I click that clip, I can move them down. It actually changed the track that time. So whenever I grab, if I grab here, it doesn't affect that clip back to the left. It only affects clips out to the right. So if you find a need to create a gap, that's how you do that. The V key is your main pointer key that lets you just click on clips individually. The C key is your blade key, where you can blade. The N key is the rolling edit key, which between clips you can roll the edit and it doesn't affect the placement of the clip. The Y key, slip tool, lets you actually move the placement of the clip within the edit. So I'm moving the placement of that edit left or right, depending on which way I drag, but not affecting the edit. And again, the N key moves the edit point, but doesn't affect the timing of the placement of the edit on the timeline. Two different ideas. Move the edit, or with the Y key, move the clip without moving the edit point. The Q key and the W key are ripple edits to the left and ripple edits to the right. So on this clip that I'm on here, if I want to get rid of everything to the left of the blue bar, I hit the Q key and it gets rid of everything back to the last edit. Ripples to the previous edit.
That means you can produce millions and millions of plants.
And if you want to edit to the ripple to the right, you use the W key. So from this bar to the right, gets rid of everything to the next edit. So it's a good way to have something on the timeline and then clean the edit up by finding the exact point you want it to start at and then ripple back to the previous edit. And again, the backspace between clips, highlight, and you can close that gap pretty easily there. And those are basic things that you can do for editing things, and some of the tools you may not have known existed. I'll give you another one. The R key is a speed increase, decrease. So if you push the R key and you get this looking little icon and you grab the end of a clip and drag it out, it's actually slowing down the clip more and more as I drag farther and farther. So that clip is now 17% speed from how far I dragged it out. I'm going to hit the Control Z to take it back to normal. You can also take a clip and make it shorter, but you're increasing the speed. So shoot, roughly halfway right there. That's going to give me about a 200%er. Where'd it go? I lost it. There it is, 218%, because I pushed it to the left and I shrank it. I'll make it about 400% right there. So there's some quick speed ups and slow downs. But that's sort of a navigation of around the keyboard. I think the next video I will show editing through a package and some tricks and sort of watch how we do that. And we'll also talk about exporting for playback on air next time.